On the morning of April 10, 1912, the world watched with admiration as the largest, most luxurious and most expensive ship ever built prepared for its maiden voyage. The Atlantic Ocean was calm and peaceful, the sky clear and comforting, and everything suggested that this journey would be perfect. More than 1,500 passengers boarded with excitement, unaware that the ship beneath their feet carried hidden flaws that would turn this dream voyage into history as most haunting disaster. The Titanic stood as a marvel of modern engineering, built over 3 years by 2,000 workers, celebrated in newspapers as an unsinkable triumph of human ambition. When it passed its sea trials successfully, confidence grew even stronger, and the world believed that no force could bring this vessel down. At noon, the Titanic left Southampton with pride and promise. Its massive engines roared to life, pushing the ship steadily into open waters. But beneath this confidence lay the first mistake, one that had already begun shaping the ship's fate. Captain Edward Smith had been ordered to reach New York by April 17th without delay. Under immense pressure from the owners to maintain the Titanic's reputation, the captain kept the ship moving at very high speed from the very beginning. Every machine has limits intended to protect it, yet those limits were ignored in the pursuit of prestige. For the next 3 days, the Titanic traveled confidently across the Atlantic. It passed France and Ireland, carrying hopeful families, wealthy travelers, and crew members who believed they were witnessing history. But on the night of April 14th, a heavy silence settled across the ocean. A thick veil of fog reduced visibility to a few meters, and somewhere ahead floated an invisible danger. Another ship, just hours ahead, sent multiple warnings through wireless messages alerting the Titanic about drifting icebergs. Experts believe these warnings were sent at least 6 times, but the wireless operators, occupied with luxury messages for first-class passengers, failed to treat them as urgent. The Titanic moved forward into the darkness, blind to the danger ahead, unaware that one missed message had already sealed its fate. As the Titanic sailed deeper into the fog, its next tragic flaw revealed itself. The lookouts in the crow's nest were alert and focused, scanning the dark horizon for any sign of danger. But they lacked the one essential tool that could have changed everything. The binoculars meant for the lookout officers had been misplaced before departure and never replaced. Without them, the crew could only depend on their eyes in conditions where visibility was nearly impossible. This oversight became the Titanic's third fatal mistake. Late that night, the lookout spotted something enormous rising from the darkness. It appeared first as a faint shadow, then as an immense wall of ice looming directly in the ship's path. The alarm was sounded instantly, but the distance was far too short. Captain Smith ordered full reverse and a sharp turn, but the momentum of the Titanic was too great. The ship's side scraped along the iceberg with a force that tore open the hull. The sound was described by survivors as a long, deep, metallic roar. Although the collision was severe, it still did not guarantee the ship's destruction. Many vessels had survived such impacts, but inside the Titanic's body was the fourth fatal flaw. The hull plates were held together by millions of rivets, many of which were made of brittle iron instead of steel. Under the enormous pressure of the collision, these rivets shattered, causing the seams of the hull to burst open. Water began flooding into compartment after compartment with terrifying speed. The Titanic was engineered to stay afloat, even if 3 of its lower compartments filled with water. But now water had breached 4 and was rapidly entering the 5th. This meant the ship's doom was no longer a possibility, but a certainty. Panic spread quickly as the crew realized the scale of the damage. Captain Smith immediately ordered distress signals to be sent into the night sky, hoping that a nearby ship might respond in time. Yet another devastating mistake awaited the passengers. Although the Titanic had space for 32 lifeboats, only 20 had been installed. For 1,500 people, 20 lifeboats were not enough. Even then, the tragedy deepened further. In the chaos and fear that followed, lifeboats were lowered half empty, many filled with first-class passengers, while hundreds waited desperately on deck. This waste of precious space became the 6th and final mistake. The ship tilted forward as water rushed into the lower decks. Families held onto each other, some refusing to separate even when ordered toward the lifeboats. Officers fired warning shots to control the crowds. The night sky flashed with distress flares, but no rescue ship was close enough to reach them in time. At 2:18 a.m., the Titanic's lights flickered and died as the enormous vessel began to break apart. The sound was thunderous as the ship split into two massive sections and plunged into the black waters of the Atlantic. More than 1,500 passengers were thrown into water colder than ice, a temperature at which survival beyond a few minutes was nearly impossible. The cries for help echoed across the ocean until they slowly faded into silence. As the Titanic continued to sink, desperation filled the decks. Crew members shouted instructions, mothers searched for their children, and men struggled to remain calm as the freezing wind cut through the night. Every minute felt heavier than the last. Families who had boarded with dreams of a new life in America now faced the unthinkable. The ship was losing its battle with the ocean. Despite the chaos, many showed extraordinary courage. Some crew members refused to abandon their posts, guiding passengers toward the lifeboats until the rising water swallowed the decks beneath them. The band, realizing the inevitable, chose to keep playing in hopes of calming the terrified crowd. Their music drifted through the cold air, blending tragically with the distant cries for help. By now, the ship's forward section had sunk so deep that the stern lifted high into the sky. Passengers clung to the railings as the deck tilted sharply. In the midst of this turmoil, Captain Edward Smith made his final decisions. He continued helping as many people as he could, urging them toward the remaining boats, knowing well that his own fate was sealed. He had promised to go down with his ship, and he intended to keep that promise. When the last lifeboat pulled away, more than 1,000 people remained on board with no escape. At 2:18 a.m., the power failed, plunging the ship into total darkness. The Titanic groaned under immense pressure, and moments later, its massive frame finally gave in. With a deep, violent roar, the ship broke apart. The stern rose one last time before plunging downward into the freezing ocean. The screams from the water were overwhelming. The temperature had dropped to -2 degrees Celsius, cold enough to paralyze the body within minutes. Even the strongest swimmers could not fight the icy grip. Less than half an hour later, the ocean had claimed nearly everyone still in the water. Out of the 1,500 souls who entered the Atlantic that night, only a handful survived long enough to be rescued. The next morning, the scale of the tragedy became clear. Lifeboats drifted silently across the calm sea, filled mostly with women and children. Many who survived did so with a heavy heart, carrying memories they would never escape. Among the dead were crew members who had refused to abandon their duty and men who had given up their seats so their families could live. Captain Smith, who had served at sea for 40 years, had kept helping until the end before disappearing beneath the waves. Investigations later revealed the full picture of what had doomed the Titanic. The ignored warnings, the dangerous speed, the missing binoculars, the weak rivets, the inadequate lifeboats, and the poor evacuation decisions had all lined up like pieces of a tragic puzzle. The ship, once marketed as unsinkable, had instead become a symbol of human error, overconfidence, and heartbreaking loss. Yet even in its failure, the Titanic changed the world. New laws were passed to ensure safer voyages, mandatory lifeboat requirements, improved wireless monitoring, and continuous ice patrols. The disaster forced humanity to rethink its faith in technology and its respect for nature. What remains today is not only the story of a ship that sank, but the legacy of those who faced the impossible with courage. Their final hours continue to echo across generations, reminding us that even the greatest creations of mankind remain fragile before the power of the sea.